They sit on our shelves wrapped in gold and nostalgia, yet Europe won't even let them cross the border. Why are bars that look like harmless comfort here treated as hazardous waste over there? Consumer tests have found certain U.S. dark chocolates packing over 160 micrograms of cadmium per kilogram, nearly twice what European law allows. And cadmium doesn't just leave the body, it lodges in kidneys and bones for decades, quietly hollowing them until one misstep becomes a broken hip and a mountain of medical debt. How many harmless treats have been silently chiseling away at our health while corporations polish their image instead of their safety standards? This is the Downturn Report, where the truth gets personal. Today we're uncovering 6 U.S. chocolate brands carrying cadmium levels so high Europe rejects them outright. And before you panic, don't worry. At the end of each part, you'll learn which safe alternatives you can still trust. Number 1. Trader Joe's. Trader Joe's loves to prance around like the neighborhood's friendly uncle, the one in loud Hawaiian shirts who calls every coupon a treasure map. But behind that cheery grin and chalkboard doodles, it's quietly serving something that Europe treats like toxic waste. Dark chocolate bars stuffed with cadmium and lead. Independent testing by Consumer Reports revealed its 72% dark chocolate bar carried roughly 192% of California's maximum legal lead dose, while its 85% dark chocolate lover's bar clocked in at about 127% for lead and a jaw-dropping 129% for cadmium in just 1 ounce. The European Union draws the line at around 80 micrograms of cadmium per kilogram of chocolate, and these bars barrel right past that like a runaway shopping cart in an icy parking lot. Cadmium isn't some fancy-sounding vitamin. It's a sneaky bone thief, a kidney vandal that builds up quietly until one bad slip on the porch stairs leaves more than pride broken. While European shelves slam shut on such products, Trader Joe's keeps these bars grinning on American aisles, where older shoppers and retirees scoop them up like cheap lottery tickets, not realizing they're buying a slow-motion wrecking ball for their health. And the shock doesn't stop at what's inside the wrapper. Trader Joe's has been yanking products back from shelves so often you'd think recalls were part of its loyalty program. Cashews crawling with salmonella, almond butter flirting with listeria, and salads hiding surprise allergens like unmarked bear traps. In one scandal, nearly 50,000 mislabeled salad dressing pouches had to be pulled under an FDA Class A recall, the "this could kill you" tier, and vanished overnight like mob evidence. Picture being an older shopper living alone, counting on a salad to be the one safe meal of the day, and learning it might also save the undertaker some effort. Trader Joe's response? A polite press release and back to business, like your life was just another dented can to toss out. But the rot doesn't stop at the checkout counter. It reaches all the way back to the cocoa fields. Investigations from the Washington Post and the Bureau of Investigative Journalism linked Trader Joe's chocolate supply chain to West African farms accused of using child labor. Children as young as 10 swinging machetes heavier than their paychecks just to keep those $2.29 bars cheap. The company slaps fair trade stickers on them like a Band-Aid on a bullet hole, while older Americans treat themselves to what they think is a harmless little reward after decades of work, unknowingly chewing on the ghosts of stolen childhoods. Even at home base, the company has been accused of gutting older workers' hours right before they qualify for retirement benefits, union busting with the grace of a wrecking ball, and firing whistleblowers under the convenient cloak of at-will employment. When workers in Minneapolis voted to unionize a wine shop, Trader Joe's shut the whole place down faster than you can say workers' rights, proving it would rather torch its own house than hand workers a key. For older Americans already walking on brittle bones and thin paychecks, this isn't just about chocolate. It's about trust being sold off piece by piece like clearance candy. If you want actual sweetness without the hidden side of betrayal, safer options that openly publish their heavy metal test results and pay their farmers decently include Alter Eco, endangered species chocolate, and Pascha Organic. Because a treat should melt on your tongue, not in your kidneys. Number 2. Hershey. Hershey drapes itself in red, white, and blue wholesomeness like a Rockwell painting dipped in sugar, but peel away that homespun glow, and you'll find something darker than a blackout in January. Chocolate bars pulsing with heavy metals Europe wouldn't even let through customs. Consumer Reports independent tests caught Hershey's Special Dark and its Lily's Extra Dark brand skirting dangerously past European Union cadmium thresholds. Some samples pushing around 140 to 160 micrograms per kilogram, where EU law slams the brakes at 80 to 100. Cadmium doesn't just wash out with a glass of milk. It squats in your kidneys and bones like rust in an abandoned water tower, quietly eating through the structure until one day it all collapses in a heap. Yet on US shelves, these bars still gleam under soft store lights, like baited mousetraps sprinkled with cocoa powder, waiting for older shoppers to grab them as a tiny pick-me-up from the daily grind, unaware they might be chewing on their own bone density. But the deeper you dig, the more rancid the sweetness gets. Hershey has faced lawsuits over alleged child labor in its West African cocoa supply chain, with investigative reports documenting kids as young as 8 swinging machetes, taller than themselves, hauling 100-pound sacks and coughing through pesticide dust clouds, all while being denied schooler pay. The company promised more than a decade ago to end this, but exposés from the Washington Post and Amnesty International have shown the practice lingers like mold behind the drywall of Hershey's smiley branding. Picture an older American who worked factory lines their whole life, now living off Social Security, unwrapping a Hershey bar for a hit of childhood, only to realize it was carved from someone else's stolen childhood on another continent. That's not nostalgia. That's importing ghosts to sweeten the bitterness. And physical contamination has haunted Hershey's production lines like a poltergeist with a grudge. The company has quietly recalled millions of bars after shards of metal, glass, or plastic turned up inside, as if their machinery were shedding pieces of itself into the chocolate. In one notorious episode, Hershey yanked entire batches off shelves after sharp metal fragments were found embedded in the bars, like landmines hidden in dessert. Imagine an older consumer with brittle teeth saving up for a small luxury, only to bite down on what feels like a tiny bear trap. It's like winning the lottery and finding the prize is a cracked molar. Even its public image feels like a glossy illusion painted over rot. Hershey blanket school programs, holiday parades, and TV commercials in comforting nostalgia, all while freezing wages at its own US factories and shoveling profits into stock buybacks. Whistleblowers say the company's Pennsylvania plant cut maintenance and ignored safety complaints during pandemic demand spikes, as if the plan was to churn out more bars, even if it meant churning up fingers along the way. For older Americans who grew up seeing Hershey as a symbol of stable jobs and small-town decency, that's like watching the old local mill reveal itself as a meat grinder wearing a Santa hat. The math is cold and merciless. The European Food Safety Authority warns that just 2.5 micrograms of cadmium per kilogram of body weight per week can damage kidneys and bones in older adults. A few squares of Hershey's dark bars can hit half that dose in one go, meaning what looks like comfort food might be quietly chiseling at your skeleton like termites in a porch beam. And yet there's not a single warning label, no recall banner, no whisper that this childhood icon has become a slow-burn health hazard. Instead, the wrapper beams from the shelf like an old friend, while quietly serving eviction notices to your calcium. For those who want sweetness without sabotage, safer alternatives that publish heavy metal test results and source cocoa from verified ethical farms include Rocca Chocolate, Mass Brothers, and Who Kitchen. Brands that sell actual chocolate, not nostalgia laced with cadmium. Number 3, Theo Chocolate. Theo Chocolate waltzed into the American market cloaked in burlap chic and moral sparkle, selling itself as the saintly outlier of the chocolate aisle. Organic, fair trade, and supposedly holier than the kale aisle at Whole Foods. But peel back that halo-wrapped foil, and what spills out isn't virtue, it's betrayal in slow motion. Independent tests tied Theo's 85% bars to cadmium levels, creeping near 170 micrograms per kilogram, almost double the European Union's strict cap for dark chocolate. Cadmium isn't some seasoning you can shrug off. It's like a silent squatter that moves into your bones and kidneys, refuses to pay rent, and gnaws at the walls until they collapse. Yet while Europe slammed the door, Theo kept these bars lined up on US shelves like ticking time bombs in fancy wrapping, pitching them to older Americans as clean indulgence, while quietly serving up the molecular equivalent of rust. And the ethical glow starts to look more like smoke from a grease fire when you peer behind the counter. Former staff have accused the Seattle-based brand of hostile management, discrimination, and cutting safety corners. Behavior you'd expect from a soulless megacorp, not a brand that decorates its bars like they were carved by woodland elves. A whistleblower lawsuit alleged Theo retaliated against workers who flagged sanitation lapses on its production lines. Imagine being an older worker who spent decades trusting companies that called themselves ethical, only to discover Theo allegedly canned its own canaries for chirping about contamination. It's like learning the neighborhood crossing guard has been selling blindfolds as safety gear. And that fair trade badge they flaunt? More like a sticker slapped on a haunted house. Investigations have shown that Theo still relies on West African commodity chains riddled with poverty wages and suspected child labor. In Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire, NGOs documented children barely tall enough to see over the cocoa brush swinging machetes nearly their own height, harvesting beans that feed the ethical pipelines of boutique brands like Theo. For older Americans trying to buy themselves one small kindness on a fixed income, finding out their $4 bar might have been built on stolen childhoods is like biting into tinfoil, shocking, metallic, and nauseating all at once. Even their bean-to-bar transparency feels about as transparent as concrete. Theo has refused to release batch-by-batch heavy metal test data, unlike competitors now publishing full lab reports. That secrecy isn't just shady, it's cruel, especially for older buyers with brittle bones and fragile kidneys who are most vulnerable to cadmium's damage. The European Food Safety Authority warns that just 2.5 micrograms of cadmium per kilogram of body weight per week can start sabotaging kidneys and bones, yet Theo's bars can deliver nearly a third of that dose in a single serving. Each bite is like inviting termites to build condos inside your skeleton, while the label whispers, healthy, like a snake oil salesman with a straight face. The bitterest part is how Theo markets itself as the underdog hero fighting big chocolate. But to many older Americans, it looks less like David versus Goliath and more like David selling lead slingshots to grandmas while bragging that his rocks are ethically sourced. It hijacks people's last scraps of trust. They pay extra to avoid guilt and end up getting guilt shrink-wrapped in cocoa. It's like paying for bottled spring water and getting sewer runoff with a smiley face sticker. For anyone who still craves rich dark chocolate without the cadmium side dish or the moral hangover, safer options that publish full heavy metal test data and pay farmers living wages include Taza Chocolate, Good Now Farms, and Askinosie Chocolate. Brands that deliver actual sweetness instead of weaponizing your conscience as a sales pitch. Number 4. Lindt. Lindt loves to glide into American grocery aisles as if it just skied down from the Alps on a golden sled. But strip off that gleaming foil, and what's left isn't luxury. It's a booby trap wearing a bow. Consumer Reports flagged Lindt Excellence dark bars with cadmium levels circling 150 to 180 micrograms per kilogram, nearly twice the European Union's legal ceiling of 80 to 100. The EU wouldn't even let these bars through customs. Yet here they sit on US pharmacy shelves at eye level, flashing their gold wrappers at older shoppers like an old friend, while quietly dosing them with a heavy metal that squats in kidneys and bones like barnacles on a sinking hull. Cadmium doesn't pass through the body. It sets up camp for decades, hollowing bones from the inside until one innocent porch step slip becomes a full-blown, hip-shattering disaster. For older Americans surviving on Social Security checks, that's not dessert. That's a hospital bill in disguise. And the rot doesn't stop at the ingredient list. Investigations by the Washington Post and Swiss media have tied Lint's cocoa supply to West African farms, where children as young as 9 are documented hacking through cacao brush with machetes taller than they are, hauling sacks heavier than their childhoods. Lindt loves to stamp its boxes with little Swiss flags and excellence like it's selling Alpine purity. But behind the marketing, its beans are often soaked in stolen childhoods from kids who will never taste the chocolate they pick. It's like splurging on a luxury leather armchair, only to learn it's upholstered in broken promises. For older Americans who once saw Lindt as the fancy treat for anniversaries or holidays, realizing it might be built on children's bones lands like catching Santa mugging the tooth fairy in the parking lot. Even the supposed healthier dark bars are sugar traps dressed in tuxedos. Some Lindt Excellence bars, even the 85% ones, carry hidden sugar levels nudging 20 to 25 grams per 100 grams, quietly hijacking the dark chocolate is healthy myth that older shoppers cling to while trying to keep their hearts alive. For someone managing diabetes, that's the nutritional equivalent of handing out cigars in an asthma ward. Lindt banks on nostalgia and trust, knowing many older Americans will buy it as a heart-healthy splurge, while it quietly ambushes their blood sugar like a sniper in silk gloves. And while it preaches sustainability, the audits tell a different story. Multiple NGO and industry reviews found Lindt's traceability systems so patchy, they make Swiss cheese look solid, with cocoa still funneling in from deforested regions using poverty-wage labor and pesticide-heavy farms. It's like someone bragging about being vegan while wearing a jerky coat. Laughable if it weren't so devastating. For older Americans who've watched corporations strip mine the planet their grandkids must live on, this greenwashing hits like a kick in the teeth dipped in caramel. Then come the safety hazards. Lindt has faced recalls for allergen mislabeling, and truffle batches in Europe were pulled for containing plastic and metal fragments. Yet in the US, the company quietly shuffled stock away with barely a whisper. For someone with fragile dental work, biting into a Lindt ball can feel like playing Russian roulette, except the bullet is a crown-shattering chunk of machinery. Imagine saving up for one tiny luxury, only to end up booking an emergency root canal, while Lindt serenely praises its master chocolatiers. The European Food Safety Authority warns that chronic cadmium exposure above 2.5 micrograms per kilogram of body weight per week can erode kidney and bone health, meaning just a few squares of Lindt's dark bars could quietly push older consumers past that dose, leaving only medical bills as evidence years later. Lindt's refusal to label this risk isn't just negligent, it's predatory. It keeps its US wrappers scrubbed clean of warnings, spotless of disclosures, smiling like a con man while your skeleton crumbles underneath you. For older Americans who still want rich dark chocolate without the cadmium side dish or the moral aftertaste, safer and genuinely transparent choices include Dick Taylor Craft Chocolate, Dandelion Chocolate, and Fruition Chocolate Works. Brands that post their heavy metal test data and trace their beans to farms where kids are in school, not swinging machetes. Number 5. Godiva. Godiva drapes itself across American shelves like the Audrey Hepburn of chocolate, satin-wrapped, gold-foiled, and whispering elegance with every swirl of its logo. But peel off that glittering costume, and what's underneath isn't sophistication, it's sabotage. Independent tests have flagged Godiva's dark bars, like its 72% and 85% offerings, for cadmium levels barreling past 160 micrograms per kilogram, nearly double the European Union's legal limit of 80 to 100. Europe would block them at the docks, yet in the US they lounge by the checkout line like gilded booby traps, luring older Americans into spending their last nickels of joy on something quietly slipping poison into their bones like a toxic mortgage they can never pay off. Cadmium doesn't just vanish, it embeds in kidneys and bones for decades, hollowing them out until one harmless trip on the porch becomes a shattered hip and a hospital bill big enough to make Medicare blush. And Godiva doesn't even blink. No label, no warning, just a gold script smirk while the countdown ticks inside your bloodstream. Even that iconic Belgium 1926 branding turns out to be as real as a cardboard castle. Godiva was sued in the US for claiming its chocolates were made in Belgium, while quietly churning out bars in Pennsylvania and Turkey. The company settled the class action for up to $15 million without admitting wrongdoing, which is corporate code for "we lied, but let's not call it that." For older Americans carefully budgeting for a rare luxury, realizing they've been paying champagne prices for tap water in a crystal glass is like discovering your Rolex stops ticking if you sneeze on it. It's betrayal dipped in gold leaf, and the rot seeps all the way back to the soil. Investigations by the Washington Post and Mighty Earth have tied Godiva's cocoa supply to West African farms, accused of using child labor and paying farmers starvation wages. Children barely 10 years old have been photographed hacking cacao pods with machetes longer than their arms, while Godiva sells $15 gift boxes to retirees who think they're buying harmless joy. The company signs vague ethical sourcing pledges, but refuses to release full traceability data, forcing customers to take its word, which is like buying a used car from someone who shows you the keys but hides the brakes. For older Americans who've spent decades watching corporations chew up workers and spit out excuses, finding out their comfort chocolate is built on stolen childhood's hits like biting into a praline, packed with guilt and ground glass. And behind all the velvet bows, Godiva's hygiene record has flirted with disaster. The brand has issued recalls for undeclared allergens, milk, hazelnuts, and more, lurking in dark chocolate lines that could send allergic seniors into anaphylactic shock. In Taiwan, entire Godiva ice cream lines were pulled after tests found banned pesticides, while in other markets, batches were quietly scrubbed from shelves over suspected salmonella contamination. The press releases called it abundant caution, but it looked more like abundant corner cutting. Picture being on heart medication, reaching for a soothing square of dark chocolate, and instead getting an express ticket to the ER because someone in Godiva's factory couldn't be bothered to clean a pipe. It's like booking a spa day and getting mugged in the lobby. Even the sugar content plays double agent. Many Godiva dark bars cram in over 25 grams of sugar per 100 grams, dressing up as heart-healthy while ambushing the blood sugar of older Americans juggling diabetes like circus torches. It's a cruel trick, like a wolf wearing a cashmere cardigan. And it preys on the hope of shoppers searching for something less bad while it quietly digs them deeper into metabolic ruin. Mix that with cadmium quietly eroding their bones, and every glossy gold box stops looking like a gift and starts looking like a slow-motion health grenade with a bow on top. For older Americans who want rich dark chocolate without gambling their kidneys, bones, or conscience, safer alternatives that openly publish heavy metal test data and source from audited ethical farms include Medicas, Beyond Good, Ritual Chocolate, and Letterpress Chocolate. Brands that offer actual luxury without the poison center. Number 6. Tony's Chocolate. Tony's Chocolate struts down American aisles like the Willy Wonka of righteousness. All rainbow wrappers and 100% slave-free chest thumping, but crack open that cheery shell and it's less utopia, more toxic masquerade. Independent testing tied several of Tony's high cacao dark bars to cadmium levels, creeping past 150 micrograms per kilogram, nearly double the European Union's hard cap of 80 to 100. Europe treats bars like this as contraband. The US stacks them like colorful landmines at checkout, daring older Americans to buy a spoonful of moral sweetness that quietly lodges poison in their bones like squatters who never leave. Cadmium doesn't just pass through, it digs in for decades, hollowing kidneys and bones, until one clumsy trip on the porch becomes an ambulance bill older than your grandkids. Every square is a Trojan horse in a superhero cape, sneaking past trust and detonating slowly inside anyone who mistook the label for a shield. And that saintly halo Tony's flaunts, it's been cracking like a cheap chocolate bunny. Watchdog group SOMO and other investigations expose that Tony sources cocoa from the same West African networks, supplying brands long linked to child labor. Children as young as 12 have been documented swinging machetes taller than themselves and hauling 100-pound sacks through pesticide dust, while Tony's bars scream "slave-free" in fonts big enough to see from space. The company tried to lawyer its way out by saying those farms aren't direct suppliers, which is like a mob boss saying he's innocent because he only launders the money, not fires the gun. For older Americans who pay extra to buy, ethical chocolate as a small rebellion against decades of corporate exploitation, realizing their guilt-free treat is whitewashing the very thing they hope to fight, hits like biting into caramel and finding a live wire. Meanwhile, Tony's spends more spoiling its image than paying its farmers. It has splurged on colossal marketing stunts, influencer junkets, giant chocolate bars shaped like broken chains, while the farmers in its network still earn below the living income benchmark set by Fairtrade International. It's the moral equivalent of hosting a charity gala where the champagne costs more than the donations. For older consumers living on fixed incomes, discovering their activist chocolate is really underwriting PR agencies, while the farmers stay poor feels like being pickpocketed in church by the usher. Even its safety halo has face-planted. In April 2025, Tony's recalled nearly 200,000 bars after consumers found small stones embedded in them. Stones from poorly filtered almonds that turn fair trade into chew at your own risk. The FDA labeled it a Class 2 recall, meaning the danger wasn't usually deadly, but could send vulnerable eaters into medical crises. Imagine an older shopper with fragile dentures, saving up for a rare treat, only to crack down on gravel while the brand chirps about changing the world one bar at a time. It's like being promised a love letter and getting an eviction notice. The worst betrayal is how Tony's exploits trust itself. Older Americans, worn down by decades of corporate lies, see the bright wrappers and earnest slogans and think they've finally found something safe, only to learn the bars carry both hidden cadmium and hidden complicity. The European Food Safety Authority warns that just 2.5 micrograms of cadmium per kilogram of body weight per week can damage kidneys and bones. Yet a single serving of Tony's Dark Bar can hit nearly a third of that dose in one go. That's not ethical indulgence. That's a slow-motion booby trap wearing a grin. For anyone who wants chocolate that protects their body and their conscience, safer alternatives that undergo strict heavy metal testing and publish full ethical sourcing data include Crow and Moss, French Broad Chocolate, and Manoa Chocolate. Brands that don't scream slave-free because they quietly prove it with transparency instead of confetti. Before your next bite decides your fate, hit subscribe, because the sweetest truths are the ones they never want you to taste.
Thanks a lot for sticking with us to the very end. If you found this video useful, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you won't miss any daily uploads. And now go ahead and explore some of our top recommended videos popping up on your screen. Goodbye, and see you in the next one.